Most people watch the news, see the horror in the world, and think to themselves, I can't imagine how hard that is. And then they change the channel because it's too painful to watch. Advocates, on the other hand, step up every single day to sit right next to people feeling pain. They meet people on the worst days of their lives. Victim advocates have a really unique role in this world. My work is a constant love letter to victim advocates to sit with people in the depths of hell. For their bravery, I want to thank every victim advocate on this planet. And although my role as a trainer is to teach advocates skills and theories that they may use in the line of duty, I often find that the advocates teach me much more. This podcast is my nod to the brilliant people who've attended my workshops and opened my eyes to new ideas every day. I'm Dr. Kate Watson, and this is Advocate Insights. All right. Welcome to Advocate Insights, folks. I'm Dr. Kate Watson, and I have a brilliant guest with me today. Today, we are joined by Alexis, a child and family advocate serving a rural county in Oregon. Alexis, what can you tell us about you? Let's get to know you a little bit.
Hi guys, thanks for having me on today. So I am a child and family advocate, as Kate mentioned. I handle everything as far as family advocacy, individual client youth advocacy, mental health, referrals and scheduling, and then as well as being a confidential advocate for a lot of our youth and teens that we serve.
You wear a lot of hats, my friend.
I sure do, and they keep piling on as well.
Do you find that that is really common among child and family advocates, wearing many hats?
I absolutely do. I think that the people that are in these spaces see the gaps and all they know how to do is close the gaps, and typically that ends up them wearing a lot of hats while those gaps are being closed by other professionals as they're able to come in. But yeah, when we don't have the proper staffing, advocates really come together to serve the community still.
Yeah. I have no doubt that there's probably an opportunity is the weird word there, but a possibility is maybe a better word of even boundaries getting a little murky when you're wearing many different hats. And I'm sure there's even the possibility of advocates getting taken advantage of, even feeling a bit exploited, like, they're being asked too much. Now, I don't know if that particular thing was on your mind, but I do know that you said you wanted to say something about professional boundaries and how that plays into our work as advocates. So, what was it that you were thinking that maybe would be useful for our listeners to hear about that?
Yeah, so when I first joined our advocacy center, something that I really appreciated and think is one of the most valuable things that I learned is the concept of what our lane is and then staying in it. This idea of we stay in our lane as professionals because each of our lanes individually are so important. And when we are swerving into other professionals' lanes, things get a little bit, like you said, murky, and boundaries can kind of be crossed. And so, yeah, there is that trivia of being an advocate, wearing many hats, knowing what your lane is, and having it be a fairly wide lane in many instances, and then making sure that you're being respectful to your community partners' lanes, whether that's law enforcement, DHS, anything, anybody who's involved, making sure you're cautiously watching the lines so that way you're not going into their lane and they're also respectfully not coming into your lane of advocacy. So like I wouldn't per se be in an investigator's lane. I would be in an advocate's lane, and I wouldn't want an investigator to try and be in an advocate's lane because that makes things pretty blurry and then hard to do our jobs properly. And so when I first heard that sentiment from my team, I was like, oh, okay. Like I was a little worried, but then moving forward and seeing each individual role that each person plays and the power in each role, I realized how important it is to be so grateful you're in that role and look at all the power that you have in that, and just be creative in that space instead of trying to fix other spaces. See what you can do in your very own space. And that's something that I've had a lot of fun doing. And I've opened a lot of doors for myself as an advocate. I think also seeing what can be done in my lane without swerving into other people's.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And as you were speaking, I was like, wow, this must come up all the time, right? Like, especially when you're asked to wear so many different hats that might send you into different lanes. And then when you step into somebody's lane, you kind of get your hand slapped a little bit, like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You're now on my territory. And I also thought of the word territory because in other fields, that word comes up. I don't think I heard you say it, and I'm glad. But in other fields, you hear people get kind of territorial, like this is mine and that is yours, and don't touch my stuff. I won't touch your stuff. This is my job. That is your job. I don't think that's what you're saying. I don't get that sense from you that you're talking about being territorial. I think you're talking about the protection of these roles for the betterment of the clients we serve. Am I hearing you right?
I think that's a perfect clarification. Absolutely. And I think it helps me gain a lot of respect for our partners and the jobs that they do. And I hope it helps them gain a lot of respect for us and our roles and the things that we do, because what I've noticed in the last 6 or 7 months is the more that I've really dove into my advocacy role and all of the possibilities that I have in serving our clients and what that looks like, the more I recognize that I'm able to be supported by our community partners by letting them have the same control and freedom in their lane, and just encouraging them to put themselves out there like I'm putting myself out there as an advocate. And so I would say I've kind of personally not dipped my toe in advocacy. I kind of jumped in head first, and I'm glad I did because it allowed me to see a lot of the gaps, in specifically in our community that we are missing. And I think a lot of the gaps that people can identify with are mental health and connecting to mental health. And what I realized is like, that's my lane, that's my job, that's where I shine, that's where I can make those connections, and not put that on anybody else but myself, because that's my job. And then I can be seen for my work in that, as well as like when I'm allowing our DHS and law enforcement partners to do their investigative work, and me staying out of that part and just being that supportive advocate to be there for my client, but not get too involved in the investigation or outcome or anything like that. It allows me to serve my client exactly how they need to be served, as support, not outcome focused, because that's not my role, is to be outcome focused.
It's a really important distinction. And in fact, when I, as a trainer, am speaking to advocates and I start teaching about particular communication skills or trauma, one of the most common things I hear from advocates is like, okay, the hand goes up and they say, wait a minute, Kate, I'm an advocate. I'm not a therapist. And it seems like there is this concern about crossing that line, which I get, right? Like, we don't want advocates presenting themselves as clinicians who can, help people heal trauma. It's not exactly the same thing. However, there is some overlap. And I think that's where it gets confusing, where your job is supportive and compassionate. And I've often said you don't need to be a therapist to be therapeutic, that I think an advocate's role can be very therapeutic without being a clinical role. I think that's just a tough thing to explain to people.
I think you're exactly right. I will give you an example. I just made a really, really powerful connection with a teen who has been resistant to any type of mental health services. And I think that's something that we see a lot. And what I tell myself is, if I'm that first person that offers them a therapeutic lens or a listening ear, no, I'm not here to heal them. I'm not there to be their therapist. That is not my lane. That is not my job. But what I can do is show them that it exists, and I can open that door, and I can model all of the care that they can receive when they move forward with those things. And so that is, I think, a line that is really hard for me and probably many other advocates, is opening that door of trust and vulnerability to their clients, their team, their youth, their caregivers that they might be working with, and letting them know that it's a safe place to be vulnerable and it's a safe place to be heard. But that isn't your job ultimately, and that's not where this leads, but you are somebody that will support them through getting those services. And so me opening that door of trust and listening to some things that this team has been through that I already know, it's nothing more on me as an advocate to lead them and to show them that people are here to listen, and then to lead them to the correct person and professional to handle that. And sometimes it does feel like the line is blurred, but I know that I'm not offering them any therapeutic services besides just being a friend, an advocate, a support person to help them open the doors that they need to open for themselves. But sometimes I just have to unlock it for them, or find the key for them, or pull it really hard. And so I think that's how I see myself in that realm, when I'm like, ooh, am I crossing a boundary? Am I doing this? I think, why am I doing it? Is it for me? Is it for something I want as an outcome? Is it for something that's going to serve myself and help me sleep better at night? Because if so, then I'm probably not in my lane. But if it's something that's going to lead this team to the support that they need in a correct manner, then I think then it can be justified and understood. But as long as it's not self-serving, I definitely think that's where things get a little bit blurry, and done for maybe wrong intentions, even if it feels right.
That's a great test to run it through. Like, who is this serving? Which I think is a nice, simple thing people can remember too. Like, when this episode is over and they walk away and they go about their jobs, they can remember to run that test of like, this thing that I'm doing, is this serving me or is this serving the client? So I think that's pretty practical, the way that you've named it. Alexis, when you started talking about what was on your mind related to our lanes and staying in them and protecting them, you framed it interestingly. You said, one of the things I'm learning, and then you went on to describe this. So I'm always curious when I speak to people, what is it that you're still learning?
I think that's such a good question, and it kind of just ties into, why are we doing this? And for me, I'm learning how this work feels in my body every day, and the hard days, the good days, all of it. And I'm learning that it's not about me at all. And I think that's my favorite thing to be learning, because it's such a humbling experience. And so I'm learning that my help and the way I put myself out there for the people that we serve doesn't need to serve me. It doesn't need to offer me anything. It doesn't need to offer me security, but that's okay, because it's not for me. And I think going into this role, you have to be really okay with selflessness without outcome. And that's something I'm really trying to wrap my head around, because I think we are human beings who want to receive when we give. And I think that's a cool part about being an advocate, is learning that you don't always have to receive when you give, and it doesn't always have to be an instantaneous feeling of completion. Advocacy is forever work, and a lot of the families that we serve, we're going to continue to serve for a while. And so I'm learning it's not for me or about me, and I can get fullness from it, and my cup can be filled from the work that I do, and that's wonderful. But that's not my intention, and that's not the end goal.
Yeah. I don't know if you realize, but you're still really talking about boundaries then. Like your view of your role in the work is boundaried. You understand what in this work is for you, almost nothing, and what in this work is for the client, hopefully all of it. One of the things I wrestle with a little bit is that phrase, like, it's not about me, because I agree that it shouldn't be. And yet it often is. And you've touched on this really well. Like, so much of what we do in a quote unquote helping interaction is like stuff I'm saying because I'm anxious, or because I want this other person to feel better, or I'm impatient right now. And so that's just something I'm really passionate about, is advocates having the self-awareness to know how much of what you're doing is actually about you, and then the self-control enough to get ourselves under control, manage our own needs, and then be able to make it all about the client. That to me is so aspirational. And I would hope that everybody's kind of working on that and still learning, as you framed it. Um, Alexis, is there anything else that you haven't had the chance to say that you were really hoping you would get the chance to say?
I think just hearing you say that last sentiment makes me think about that. You're so right that I am quoting, I'm saying, it's not about me, it's not about me. But I can tell you very, very honestly and transparently that it's it doesn't feel about future me, but it feels about past me. And I think a lot of advocates can resonate with that this is a lot of like healing inner child work that we're doing. And each day, I think I move forward with the passion that I do, because it's not for me now and it's not for future me, but it's for past Alexis and little Alexis that needed somebody to speak up for her. And when I'm working with my clients, the youth that I serve, I'm able to see parts of little Alexis in each one of them. And so I'm able to see the kid that needed to be heard, but then see the person in front of me and see what they actually need. And I think that's a powerful part of advocacy and a hard thing to do. And it's not always consistent across the board. I think that there are days that I'm more, emotionally impacted by the things that we're dealing with, where I'm like, oh my gosh, little Alexis is really popping out here. And then there are days that I don't feel her as much needing the support. But I think that there's a lot of truth to that, that we're very connected to this work, and rightfully so, but making sure that we're still seeing the person in front of us and not ourselves and them, because we're not going to be able to serve them correctly if we're just looking at ourselves.
Yeah. You saw me smiling. I just thought that was, kind of a cool thought. And as we're getting ready to close here, and I'm thinking about just how great this conversation was, and I'm getting ready to thank you for being here, but I almost want to put that aside and say, I bet little Alexis is thanking you for being here. And like, I just love the thought of, your past self knowing that you're on this podcast right now, you're sharing your insights with other advocates. So that to me is more important than me saying, well, thanks for being here. I kind of hope little Alexis is thanking you for being here. To the listeners, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please send me a message. You can send it right to me at kate@advocacyacademy.org. That's Kate, Kate, at Advocacy Academy, like it's all one word, .org. I'd be happy to hear from you there. You can also find us on Instagram, Threads, and YouTube using the handle at AdvocateW. So that's Advo, ADVO, then my name, Kate W, KATEW. So all together, it becomes at Advocate W. Check us out next time when we explore more advocate insights.